So let's start for today. And in the end, we're going to show the QRS code for the quiz. And I have to remove these strange things here. Sorry, I have to get them out of the way and start it again. Okay. So let's start with another book tip. Last time I showed you a book about brainwaves, and now I want to show you just a second book tip. One of my favorites, it's Niedermeyer's Electroencephalography. I think there's no new edition, but well, the EEG is 100 years old, so you can use that from 2017. It now costs quite a bit, but it's the most extensive and scientific book on the EEG for clinicians to use it. And it's also covering many topics on psychiatry. So I like this book a lot. So then second news update. This is not a reminder, but it's some memorial for Max Fink. Max Fink was one of the key persons to establish ECT throughout the past century. He started it, I think, in the 50s and 60s, and he was one of the heads also of one of the founders of the Pharmaco EEG Society. He passed away at the age of 102, and he was also big into EEG and electrophysiology. He did LSD studies using EEG. He did ECT studies using EEG, and I think the field has lost a very important person, but we hope that things will continue in his matter. And so just one slide of his works. So in the, I don't know, I think it was in the 50s, he showed that LSD has an impact on the central nervous system activity by means of EEG measures. And you see here on the right side, on the right bottom, you see that this is a spectrogram of the EEG. So here is the frequency of 9 to 12 hertz, so the alpha band, and you see the power here in the black line. This is the normal power when you close your eyes, you know, this ground rhythm of the brain. And when you administer LSD, then this alpha activity goes down. And this is still a hallmark of what LSD and psilocybin do to the brain activity. So this alpha activity goes out, fast activities get more, and the slower activities decrease. And then after giving, and this is very special, after giving chlorpromazine, so a neuroleptic drug, to counteract the LSD in a way, you see that alpha activity again rises even past the initial power. So this is one of the first studies. And maybe also a quick reminder, now that we are witnessing the upcome of LSD in our field again and other psychedelic drugs, they have used it in the 50s and 60s. Not only the hippies did, but also physicians did. And there was a reason why they didn't use it to more extensively. It was not only in a missing regulatory framework, but I think we have to be very careful and have to go on very stepwise and not to be too fast with these drugs, even nowadays. All right, so let's get to today's topic. So maybe you read, so it's only EEG cases. So yes, we will try to look at 3 EEGs today, 3 not neurological, but psychiatric EEGs about some of the topics we covered. But before we dive into these, we have one more special topic, and this is the event-related potentials, the ERPs, which occupy quite a domain in EEG, especially research. And the ERP is also important in neurology. However, we just want to cover a little bit that you understand what are ERPs, and what are they used for, and how do they look like. And the most important thing is that these event-related potentials are some waves in the EEG that are, as this name tells you, they are time-locked. That means you make an average of many attempts where you have a time-locked signal. That could be, for example, an auditory cue. So you hear a noise, you hear a sinus tone or something, and you do that repeatedly, and then you lock the event to this tone and cut all the EEGs to the start of the tone. So then you get an event-related potential with a time-locked auditory response. You can do that also for visually cues, for example, showing a picture of, let's say, an apple multiple times, And all the time you see this apple, your brain does something, and then you time lock it, the many trials to this stimulus onset, and then you get a wave. And we will see further on why this is the case and why you cannot use single event-related potentials as they are. You need to average them to get to see them and analyze them. The big advantage of these ERPs is they have an excellent temporal resolution in the millisecond level. That means studying EEG always means you're very close to the window where neural activity takes place. You're not covering like seconds like in the fMRI or even hours or minutes like in the PET scan, but you're really covering the milliseconds of the summed action potentials are going on, or the excitatory postsynaptic potentials are going on. And the other good thing is, of course, it's non-invasive and relatively affordable compared to other neuroimaging methods. So event-related potentials nowadays are very common. You can buy your home set for EEG and maybe do some basic ERP research. Now, let's look at what event-related potentials can tell us, what they look like. We won't dive into the very specific meanings of these potentials. But what is now important is here you have the time lock. So the 0 is the time point where you have the stimulus onset. That could be, as I said, some auditory tone, some visual stimulus, or maybe even some touch, or maybe even your heartbeat, which is also a somewhat sensory event. Having a time locked at 0, and then you see a specific wave. And remember, toward up is negative, so the waves are called N -1, the first big wave, and the positive is going down, P1. So I have the P1 and the N1. Sometimes it's a little bit specific. The N2 often fits with the 200 milliseconds post-stimulus onset, but this is not always the case, and the P3 is also after 300 milliseconds. So these are very specific and very prominent examples of these waves. It's the N1, N2, P1, P2, P3, and then there are the so-called late potentials, late positive potentials going on afterwards. And one important thing is the earlier the potentials are, the closer they are to not having been processed too much in the brain. And the further away from the 0 those potentials are, means more and more cognitive processes are kicking in and trying to get involved into the stimulus. So brainstem potentials, for example, would be very early, and later on there are cognitive processing potentials that show that, for example, sentences are being processed in the brain. So on the left side, you see some examples, P1, N1 early sensory components, mid-latency components, P2, N2, and the so-called P3 late positive component linked to stimulus evaluation and context updating, for example, if you have an oddball paradigm. So this is where you see, and this we will see a video shortly after. So here you see an example of many average brain waves. It's a simulation, it's not a real EEG. However, what you see is all these colorful waves are, I think, 50 or 100 different waves, like a spontaneous EEG, and you just record it. And you remember the amplitudes of the EEG are between 10 and 100 microvolt, and here you see 10 microvolt is what you get, or 5 microvolt is what you get when you average the signal. So via averaging, you cancel out all the noise, and what you get is the ERP curve for that single person showing the specific response to a stimulus, and get no noise or almost no noise from the surrounding spontaneous activity. So what we see here now is how it works. So I hope this works. Yes, you get the animation. So you get overlaid many trials, and this is fast forward, of course, many trials, and then you get it slowly. You see the average black is getting shaped by the averaging process, and now you see here we have the an ERP with the first positive, the second negative, and going on and so on. So this is what ERPs are for, and of course you can try to locate them on the brain. You can use them, for example, for auditory evoked potentials for assessing the serotonergic activity of the brain. However, none of these ERPs in psychiatry has made its way into the clinics, so we don't use that clinically, so to say. We sometimes could do it in a more research fashion, but however, it's good to know what ERPs are for and why you can use them. For what you can use them.
Good.
So before we start with the cases,
if you have the slide open, Sebastian, just a quick reminder, please do the quizzes. We have 7 sessions online. You can still jump into all the different sessions just with the one link. We like to evaluate also the quizzes and the whole course after the last and next session next Monday. Just also to learn more about how you liked it and what you liked, what you didn't like, and what we should change for the next iteration, maybe this autumn or even next spring. So please take part in the quizzes. We made an effort to make some nice questions, and all these questions have explanations, so it should also have a learning effect on the stuff you learned here straight from Sebastian, but to also just like memorize it even better and have a better retrieval. You can do that again. So please join the quizzes. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for providing the quiz. I think that's a really important contribution, and that keeps the people in the topic. And this is the second slide. This is the videos edited by Tobias.
Oh yeah, sorry, we have a YouTube channel and you can watch all the sessions so far. You see up to session 6, today is session 7. So if you missed anything or you need some help to also accomplish the quizzes, you can always go back to the YouTube channel and listen to Sebastian again. So if you missed a session, no problem, you can watch it later on our channel. Thanks a lot.
Cool, thanks for providing this. And now I will close the presentation and we go to, let's see, let's start with some EEGs. And since I think next Monday, there will be the last EEG curriculum so far. So the basic, maybe we start with, or we will start with the curriculum in the next semester, maybe covering more scientific topics, we will see, but also staying with the cases in the clinic. And for today, I prepared 3 EEGs, more or less randomly, but still they have some psychiatric indication, and we did the EEGs. So if you find the time now, you can join me, and maybe you can open up your microphone and just say something if you want to say something. So I slowly go through the EEG, just again as a reminder. So we now have the average. I already did the average. We have the 550 microvolts. So check it always in the beginning if you start with the EEG, so that you have your settings. On the right side, you see the markers. And we start again in the beginning with going to eyes up, eyes closed. So we see here we are at the beginning of the EEG, and here we are doing the eyes up. And here we see the eyes closed. Let me see again. And what do you see? So here we have again the eyes closed, and here eyes are going up or open. So what do you think? Is this a good reaction to eyes closing and eyes opening? Anyone wants to take microphone? No one there?
I think it's cool, good, isn't it? I mean, it was alpha rhythm, and then you open the eyes.
Yes, that's fine, exactly. So let's check. So occipitality, we have the eyes closed because we see the marker. I don't know. I hope you can see it in the on your screens. Here the eyes are going open. You see it also on the artifact. And we have the alpha activity here. Very good. You can see it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And here the eyes go open, and now we have a flat EEG. So the reaction for this eyes opening is good. And we go further, and here we have the eyes closed. So it's closing the eyes again. You see the artifacts from the eyes blinking. And then again, you see here that alpha comes back, and mainly at central and frontal, but also at occipital regions. Okay, so Berger effect is good, so there's nothing too serious, so it seems conscious and awake, and the vigilance is not too bad. However, what we see here is some faster activities, and we continue. I just scroll through it, and I want to know, so the question for this patient was, is there any organic cause for depression in the EEG, since he was administered for ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, and we needed to check whether there are some signs, for example, for epileptic activity, or if there are some signs, for example, for other causes of the depression, for example, focal slowings. So we go slowly through that, and we see, okay, the alpha rhythm is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I always count it 3 times and then make the average. So it's between 9 and 10, the average. However, what we see here is that sometimes things get a little bit slower. We will continue and see that here you see at PZ. So let's take a look at that. So you see here, you see some slower waves, and they are only on the temporal side. So you have here a temporal slower waves, also here and here. So there seems to be some kind of slowing. And we also go a little bit further and see that here during that second, I now mark the second, you have a little bit slower activity. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So alpha activity is slowing down to some degree. However, we see alpha can be fast enough, but there is a slowing. And now we have 2 possibilities. Either this person has a perfect EEG, but is getting drowsy, and this is why it's slowing. Or maybe there may be, remember the last time, there may be some kind of dementia. However, if you look at the EEG, activity seems to be good. Only this temporal slowing seems to be there. Again, here you see some higher amplitudes and some, again, slow activity showing up, but it is not very severe. However, there is a little bit there. So what we could write in the EEG is, yes, there is a kind of slowing in the EEG, and it is not only vigilance. You see, it is mainly at the temporal and occipital sites, not always everywhere. And one should, or maybe want to do an MRI. We do an MRI always before we start an ECT session, but this is an indication to look for example for some dementia processes, some atrophy in the MRI. However, this is not a contraindication for ECT, but it guides our diagnostic process a little bit. Again, here, maybe you now have the eye for that. There's some slow elements coming in. However, what you do not see is some epileptic or epileptiform activity. And we continue with that. And what we always have to check, and now switch to that. So we find some focal slowings, and also here it's getting some kind of generalized slowing. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hertz. So really it's slow, and it's at the edge of being an indication of maybe some dementia process. So,
Sebastian, maybe you can say something about the medication. Does the patient has any medication maybe slowing the EEG?
Yes, so I don't show medication now because there's its name written all over, or her name. There was, you're right, we should have checked the medication. So if we have, for example, neuroleptic drugs, there could be some slowings. However, what is not always the case, so if you have some neuroleptic medication, you should have, for example, a general slowing, so the activity goes down beyond a certain frequency. This patient has no neuroleptic medication, so it's unlikely that this caused slowings. But you're right, normally you should have to look at the medication and rule out that it's not a metabolic or an maybe even organic cause, but that it is drug that causes the effects. What we then again should do is we look at the hyperventilation. So the hyperventilation is the stress situation. You can find it here at the bottom where a lot of these markers are. You can also look here at the markers. So HV, hyperventilation, is starting here. And we look here because if it is really a focal lesion, for example, like a tumor or an infection in some part of the brain, the slowing that we detected before should be more pronounced, okay? So we go to this, and what we see here is during breathing, so breathing the CO2 away, we see that the activity is fast enough. So it's not really slowing down. We go further to see if this slowing kicks in, and then we see if it is the focal region still getting slower. And we see, yes, it's getting slower, but, and this is important, we see that this slowing now is all over the brain. And this is a normal reaction. If I would breathe for a very long time, my brain also wants to slow down and get slower. So having a slowing during hyperventilation all through the electrodes is normal. Having only a specific slowing in some regions, this is more pathological. And we look over here, and now we see this is some slowing, and this is not all over the other electrodes. So this is only at, again, temporal and occipital side, so the one we had before. So put it all together. In this EEG, at first we have a general slowing of the basic rhythm, sometimes below 8 Hertz, which might be an indication for a dementia process. And we have some slowings, not very pronounced, very slight slowings at temporal and occipital sides, mainly at the left side, again here P through FZ, and they are more pronounced during hyperventilation. So we should check the brain via brain scan to rule out any other local causes or focal causes of this depression. So we continue, and I now switch toward the the photic stimulation, and here we see, okay, it's reacting, and I go quickly through that, having some odd-looking activity here and some artifacts all over, but this is normal, so it doesn't look very specific, and we just quickly check if there are ETPs, but there are not. Okay. Any questions to that? Otherwise, we can go to, let's say, let's look at that. Okay. So this was the first question. This is a question. Patient is coming because he has ADHD, and the physician or the psychiatrist, she wants to use Velvotrine, bupropion, as the drug in this patient, since it has been shown that in ADHD with depression, this drug, due to its stimulating effect on the dopaminergic activity, is good. However, bupropion is known for being able to induce epileptic seizures in some patients. So we check before if there are some ETPs, and so we will be more aware of how to dose the drug. So let's go to this EEG, and this is the first page. We go to eyes open, eyes closed. And what do you see here? So now we have the eyes open. Is there a good reaction? So in the middle is the eyes open. So you cannot do something wrong. Anyone?
A smaller reaction than the other patient, at least. It is a reaction. It's getting faster, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So we have here, we have some alpha activity, but it's already decreasing whilst the eyes are closed. Yeah. And then he's opening the eyes and nothing happens anymore. So we need to look at where the eyes are closed again. And here we see this activity, the flat activity, eyes closed, and now someone else. Is it a good reaction or not? Now, after closing the eyes. Okay, someone makes his thumbs up or thumbs down. Do you dare? Yeah.
I think it's good. It's alpha after opening the eyes.
Yes, exactly. So eyes are closed, and here you see a very good alpha activity. We can count it. I just marked 1 second. So we count it, go to the occipital side, say going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 11 Hertz. And now let's switch the montage. Now we have, this is more what I like, the average again. And here you see again the 11 Hertz. So this is a very nice reaction, and it's shorter this time. So we still have the alpha, and then the eyes go up, open again, and then you have a flat EEG. And is there something specific? What do you think? What is this? What kind of activity is this? It's flat, but is there something special about it where you say, well, the one before didn't have this? Look at these things here. Do you know what kind of activity these small things are here? So this is one faster. This is a beta activity. Okay, it's a very fast beta activity, and you have it either you are calculating something special, or you are very drowsy, or you took some benzodiazepines. These are the three things you could see in that. And we continue because, as I showed you before, so there are the others, and now we are at the start of the resting EEG, and we continue. And as you see, here we have a nice alpha activity at occipital and temporal sites, but at frontal sites, FZ, frontal midline, we have this activity. Okay, and this is like, and you see it's going up and it's going down. And if you count it for 1 second, it's 1 to the group, maybe 20, 25. So it's a clear beta activity, and it's almost like a spindle. So what we now have to decide is it either a very invigilant patient, so very, very drowsy, or did he take some benzodiazepines? In the medication list, there was no benzodiazepines in his medication list. So it could be that this patient, and you see it over here, so it's really a spindling activity, waxing and waning of the beta. So if there would not be this alpha activity, we would say he has fallen asleep. And this after, look at that. So not a minute into the resting EEG. So he closes his eyes and after 30 seconds. And now remember what I told you about the vigilance framework. So this is very specific to ADHD patients. So if you see this drowsiness, they need stimulants to keep their brain up. So this patient already is under, I think, Concerta and Vanze, and still he has this drowsiness pattern. So one could either think of, if clinical relevant, to increase the dosage, or maybe now starting bupropion, which might be a good idea. I don't know the patient himself, but could be a good idea. And we continue here, and now we see that the alpha goes away, and the only remaining activity is the spindle activity. And this indicates this patient really is very drowsy, almost sleeping. Sorry. We also see here at the electroocologram that we have slow activity. Remember, when you fall asleep, your eyes start to roll. And now, finally, no alpha left. This is a classical spindle, over half a second, clear spindle shape. And so now here he starts to sleep. This is definitely sleeping. Okay, and you see this in many patients and in ADHD patients quite often. Then he wakes up again, and we continue to go through that. And then in the end, we see here electroocologram gets larger and larger and larger. And you see it here, alpha goes away more and more. So he's away. And here we have the photic stimulation, but we cancel that because the time is over again for today. I prepared one more, maybe have just a quick look so you can see how different EEG looks like. Again, we have the average, and we go through that. And just one look. So we see this is eyes closed, ground activity. And what do we see here? So this is again a patient who came for ECT. And with the question, could there be other causes? And here is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So very, very close to being too slow. And if you continue with the EEG, just 10 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 hertz basic rhythm. This is a generalized slowing in this patient. And if there is, I then looked it up, it's an old patient, I think 70 something, and the mini-mental status was below, I think 25 or 23. He couldn't draw a watch. So we have a clear signs that he's not only depression and solid dementia, but there is dementia going on, and I think this is important. However, going back again, if he has depression, although he has dementia, still we should do the ECT. That was it. Showing you 3 cases just from last Friday from the EEG, and maybe showcasing why it is still important to use the EEG in psychiatry. Are there any questions for today's cases? Okay, so the next time Stefano Ferreira will tell you something about the markers we use clinically here in the book. Okay, so thanks for joining us today.